We spend a lot of time monitoring the standard indicators of mental stress, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
We check our sleep trackers, we look at our appetite, or we try to force ourselves to get through that pile of work.
Yeah.
But what about the patterns that live entirely behind closed doors? The quiet, deeply private habits that are kind of our personal escape hatch.
That is the hidden language we are trying to decode today. When
Hmm.
we talk about mental health, these intensely personal solo behaviors, they just get skipped over.
They really do.
They might seem purely physiological, but the timing, the frequency, and this is the key, the reason behind the action, it can be a really powerful emotional barometer.
And that's the intersection we're diving into.
Yeah.
This is not about judging the behavior itself.
Yeah.
That's completely irrelevant here.
Not at all.
It's about listening to the signal that your subconscious is trying to send.
Our mission today is really to illuminate how these solo habits are just intrinsically tied to your emotional well-being. The core insight we want you to walk away with is this. Your body is often trying to cope with an emotional reality.
Like anxiety, loneliness, stress.
Exactly. Things that your conscious mind hasn't quite put into words yet.
So we'll start with the core question, and we really encourage you to be honest with yourself here. Have you ever sought release? Not primarily out of physical desire, but because you were acutely anxious.
Or just suffocated by stress.
Or even just trying to manage a crushing wave of boredom. The action itself doesn't define you, but the motivation that absolutely reflects your inner landscape.
It really does.
So let's start by mapping out what we call the comfort zone. This is where that private habit functions like an emotional buffer.
An emergency eject button.
Yeah, an eject button for discomfort. Think about a sudden surge of anxiety or that vast empty stretch of time that just demands to be filled. The habit is right there.
It's immediate, it's accessible, and it gives you a guaranteed, if, temporary dampening effect on whatever psychological noise is happening.
It's the ultimate default setting for avoidance then.
It is. Now, if you use this habit in moderation, when you're truly seeking pleasure or connection, it's totally harmless. But the red flag goes up when this behavior becomes the only.
Or the default.
The default response to any form of internal distress. When that happens, you've basically installed an emotional avoidance strategy.
And we saw this mechanism just accelerate dramatically during periods of collective stress, right? I'm thinking back to the global lockdowns, that great pause you mentioned.
Exactly. The data from that period is, it's exceptionally telling. Researchers found a very clear correlation. Many people reported a significant uptick in this behavior.
Right.
And they often tied it directly to things like increased anxiety, depression, and especially just pervasive boredom.
So they weren't reporting an increased libido.
No, not at all. They were reporting an increased need for a psychological reprieve. The body was just reaching for a fix to regulate stress hormones, not necessarily a physical connection.
But how do we actually know the difference? I mean, for the listener, what biological switch is this flipping that makes it so much more immediate than, say, going for a run?
It's the immediate localized nervous system response. This behavior provides a rapid, predictable peak and valley, which, it momentarily overrides all those chaotic internal signals of stress. A run takes time and effort to produce those endorphins.
Look at this.
This habit delivers a rapid, self-contained hit of chemical regulation. It's effective because it's fast, and it requires zero social engagement or external motivation.
Okay, that makes the stakes really clear. So the actionable pause here, the very first step toward awareness is to just intercept that automated sequence.
Just for a second.
The next time the urge comes up, just try pausing for a moment and sincerely asking yourself, what specific emotion am I trying to avoid or soothe right now?
And don't rationalize it. Don't judge the answer.
Just name the feeling.
That's it.
Understanding that first trigger is so critical. But what happens when that awareness doesn't immediately lead to control? That's where we get into the much tougher territory of the loop of frustration. I mean, picture the scene. It's so familiar. You promise yourself a break, a week off, a reset.
Yep.
But then, almost outside of your conscious decision-making, it happens again.
Yeah.
And the aftermath isn't relief. It's this crushing wave of frustration.
Like your body's betraying you?
Exactly. Like your body's operating without your permission. You feel trapped.
And that feeling of being stuck, that points towards something far deeper than just, high desire. It frequently signifies a deep emotional overload. It's not about how much you want the action, but how urgently your internal system needs to dump psychological pressure.
So the brain isn't asking for more. It's asking for relief.
We see this all the time in research on compulsive sexual behavior. It's often categorized not as high libido, but as a rigid maladaptive mechanism that's used specifically to manage internal distress.
So the brain is asking for emotional regulation, not physical release.
Precisely. The nervous system is overstimulated, maybe it's running in fight or flight mode, and this habit is simply the fastest route it knows to force a physiological reset, to get back to a baseline calm.
But if it's a regulation mechanism, how can a listener tell the difference? How do you distinguish that deep need for regulation from simply having a strong, healthy libido that needs expression?
That distinction lies almost entirely in the aftermath and the intent.
Okay.
If you act on a healthy libido, the feeling is usually positive, connected, satisfying, with little to no guilt. But if you're acting purely for regulation, the intent is driven by anxiety or avoidance.
With the feeling after.
It's typically fleeting, and it's followed almost immediately by frustration or emotional exhaustion because the underlying emotional problem wasn't solved. It was only masked for a moment.
That timing is the real giveaway then.
It is.
So we encourage trigger awareness here. Analyze the moments just before. Is the urge really showing up after an hour of intense work stress, or right after an argument, or when you're facing acute loneliness?
That timing is the key. It unlocks the root cause of the regulation request.
Okay, moving on. The post-habit experience it's rarely uniform, right? For some, it's pure, clean relief. But for many others, it's an immediate, gut-wrenching emotional hangover. Guilt. Shame.
And that feeling isn't arbitrary. It is deeply rooted in our individual ecosystem of beliefs, cultural, religious messages we internalize as kids that maybe categorize pleasure as wrong or dirty.
Or just something to be hidden.
Exactly. And this connects us to this philosophical concept of moral incongruence.
That internal war.
It's an internal war that erupts when your personal actions, which are giving you temporary relief, clash directly with your deeply held values about who you should be. And that friction, that moral friction, generates immense internal distress, shame, and significant self-doubt.
It's the worst kind of cognitive dissonance. You needed the relief, but the method of relief contradicts your moral compass.
Exactly. And this is why the shift in inquiry is so critical. Instead of focusing on that punitive question, was this right or wrong according to my old code?
Which just leads to more shame.
It does. We suggest a genuine internal pivot. Ask instead, was I acting out of care for myself, addressing a real need, or was I acting out of avoidance, desperately running from a feeling?
That reframing is essential, but it's so hard to do when shame is overwhelming. How do you practically begin to make that shift from judging the action to showing compassion for the need?
You start by acknowledging the pain of the clash itself. You just say, I recognize that I am in distress because my need for relief conflicted with my values.
So,
Then, you treat the habit like a symptom, not a character flaw. You shift the focus entirely to the need that came before the action. If the need was loneliness, the compassion is in acknowledging that loneliness, not in punishing the way you temporarily dealt with it.
and that opens the door to healthier coping later.
It does.
Now let's talk about a pattern I think a lot of listeners find really unsettling. The silence. Let me use an analogy. The habit becomes purely mechanical. There's no spark, no excitement, just routine.
Like a duty.
A duty, yeah. A checkbox.
Yeah.
You used to feel vibrant and great, but now it's just automatic.
That absence of feeling, that emotional numbness, is a huge signal. It requires attention. It may be pointing toward what's called anhedonia.
The clinical loss of interest or pleasure in things that once brought joy.
Right. And for anyone who thinks this only applies to hobbies or food,
No, it's pervasive.
it is a core symptom of depression. And yes, it absolutely manifests in intimate or solo behavior. If you notice the joy, the connection, or the sensory richness has just evaporated from an activity that used to give you a lift, your emotional well-being is signaling exhaustion.
Your system is carrying too heavy a load.
Far too heavy for far too long. The engine is running, but the spark plug is fouled.
So the body isn't broken, it's just running on empty. And it's using the bare minimum energy to perform a learned routine.
Yeah.
So to gently combat that, we can start with small sensory exercises.
We need to invite the senses back into the moment without the pressure of performance. Try consciously reconnecting to tangible senses outside of the habit. The feeling of warm water on your hands in the shower, the texture of a soft blanket,
The taste of a piece of food.
the full sound of a song in your ears. This is a gentle, low-stakes way to reintroduce sensory awareness. It tells your nervous system that it's safe to feel again. That numbness is just a protective shield that can now be gradually lowered.
Okay, let's synthesize everything we've talked about and bring it back to that moment of decision. If we look at the seconds just before the urge kicks in, what truly shows up first, arousal or emotion? Is it that feeling of profound solitude, the adrenaline crash after a difficult day, or the weight of a long night stretching ahead? Almost universally, emotion is the precursor.
That's the key psychological finding. We know that some individuals are hypersensitive to internal emotional stress, and their nervous system has learned that the fastest, most effective way to regulate that stress energy is through a highly patterned sexual
The
urge.
system seeking equilibrium.
It's a system seeking equilibrium and relief, not necessarily pure pleasure.
And, crucially, understanding that this is a nervous system coping mechanism, a type of self-medication.
Hmm.
It immediately removes the shame and the judgment attached to it.
It's just an internal process trying to help you survive emotional discomfort. It's a pattern.
A pattern.
And to truly map that pattern, we conclude with the most powerful, simple tool, the quick log.
Okay.
Keep a non-judgmental log of just a few words. Note two things. What were the immediate circumstances and emotions before the urge?
Like just finished a fight, or endless scroll feeling empty.
Exactly. And then how you felt immediately after. Frustrated. Brief calm.
Those patterns are invaluable. They don't just show you your triggers, they show you what your heart beneath the surface habit might truly be asking for.
Connection, rest, stimulation.
Or just a break.
Mm-hmm.
So we circle back to our central theme. Your private habit is not a judgment on your character, but an incredibly accurate, if sometimes painful, reflection of your internal state.
It is.
Whether you're experiencing guilt, compulsivity, numbness, or just fleeting relief, awareness is the crucial, compassionate first step. You are allowed to listen to your body without judgment.
If your body is overwhelmed, it naturally finds the most direct and predictable way to ask for attention. It speaks in the only language it really knows, the necessity of action. So the deepest dive is not into the habit itself, but into what that focused attention is truly revealing about your most fundamental unmet needs. The knowledge is now yours. What profound question does this awareness now raise for you about how you manage your inner world?